The Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversation with everyday folks about the mystery of life. This podcast is a complement to the Numinous School, my online intuition development program for people who want their self-awareness to serve a greater good. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, and today on the podcast, I'm connecting with my dear friend and soul sister, Jenn Richardson. Jenn is the yin to my yang, the Shakti to my Shiva. Whenever she's been on retreat or quest with me, she has always said the thing I forgot I wanted to say. So I love circling with her because she is raw and real and tells the truth, even if her legs are shaking and her voice is tight. She really sees people and accepts people and has a clear, strong connection to the other worlds. And of course, her skill as an intuitive and as a poet and as a friend has been hard fought and painfully wrought through surviving some very difficult experiences, as so often is the case. One topic we often circle back to when Jenn and I are talking and drinking, either late into the night or sometimes just over Skype in the afternoon, is the parenting we received, or didn't so much receive, when we were teenagers and younger adults. I spoke with Jenn online. She was at home in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So Jenn, I'd like to start the interview with Desiree Attaway's question that she often uses in conversation. So let's begin with you telling us, what identities do you lead with?
Well, I thought about it. The word that came to mind was banshee.
You're like, hi, Jenn Richardson.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of is that intense right now. But in when I'm trying to behave in the world, I would say probably poet, queer, and feminist. Yeah. But really always banshee.
But really, that's also reminding me of like, you and I have done a lot of kind of marketing observation work stuff over the years, right? As we've kind of been working in the healing space. And so, they're like, I could say that I'm a hypnotherapist, but really I'm a trance enchanter.
Yeah.
Or something, it's like, but really. But I would love to see the business card that says, but really, banshee.
But really banshee.
Actually, it should be like really banshee. Like it's an emphasis.
Really.
I'm like super banshee right now.
Full stop.
Yeah. So I would love for us, while we're in this like playful mood, can you go back to telling us what Jenn was like at like, I don't know, like 9 or 10? Like what is a junior banshee in training like?
Well, at 9 or 10, I was probably quite a stoic banshee at that point. I would say to really like have the full wild banshee, you'd probably have to go back to about 4. But I was, my mom explains me often that I came out walking away, and that, and she loves this story. When I was 2, she said, okay, it's time for a nap. And I said, why do I always have to have a nap when you're tired? So, I would say that that's probably where it was like peak banshee. And then, as the world asks you to shift and conform, I was a well-behaved banshee by 9 or 10 years old, but a seeker for sure at that age. Like looking, yeah.
Where were you looking and what for?
I was looking for belonging, and I was looking for connection. So when I was like 7, I decided I was going to start going to church. So
we just paused there because that's weird.
Yeah.
I'm just joking. I did the same thing. I was always trying to ask, especially my Catholic friends, if they wanted to have sleepovers. You know how picking up after school on Friday is kind of what you do, but I would always ask if I could stay over on Saturday so I could tag along to Sunday school.
Precisely.
What do they do in those fucking meetings? Where are the kids going?
Exactly.
I want the stuff. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was like trying to conform at that point, I think at 9 or 10 years old. But yeah, I'm just trying to find the place, Um,
Mm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. But
And can you tell us what the environment was like? Like, tell us about the town where you lived.
So grew up really rural, grew up pretty poor, um, like very working class, I will say, but definitely in poverty. Um, yeah. And I grew up doing a lot of things outdoors. So um, until I was about 7. And so this, we're here to talk about my dad is what I believe. So
Yeah.
yeah. So my dad was an alcoholic, and he started drinking when I was about 7 or 8 years old. But until that time, I had sort of access to the wild because because we were poor. I just thought that poor people ate seafood, and we would go fishing and do all that kind of stuff, camping, lots of outdoors things. And then um, once his drinking impacted the family, he wasn't there anymore, and of course my mom had to pick up everything. So there just wasn't the time for that
Mm.
to really be a thing. And I was really into Girl Guides, so that worked to satisfy it a little bit. But yeah,
Mm.
seeking community, I was in the church.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so your dad's drinking starts to really impact the family while you're still quite young.
Hmm.
And what was it like for you in your teenage years? How did the drinking evolve?
Hmm. Well, we weren't even really in touch. Like he left the community when I was about 10. And then we would talk to him a couple times a year. My mom, she taught good lessons in that time. Like, because I would say, I don't want to talk to him because I was angry, and she would say, well, just tell him that you're angry. Like, he's your dad. He can handle that. Like, if you're angry, you tell him that you're angry. That's all you have to say. That's all you have to say, you know? And so that was sort of the relationship. It wasn't really one. I saw him, oh, he, no, he was hitchhiking to come back up to where the family, or like where my family was living. And so I was about 14, I guess. Um, and I don't know if he was drinking like when he left to come up, but he started drinking while he was back on the island regardless. And he got picked up by the police. And he got the shit kicked out of him by the police and ended up in hospital. Um, and so we saw him then. He was, we had to go, we weren't sure if he was going to survive or not. He did. He lived that time. But yeah, so I saw him then, and then he came back just for a couple months before he died when I was 17. But it was mostly not a relationship. Like it was, yeah, I got cards.
So your
But
dad he was homeless for a lot of the time, and
yeah,
you're in this really small island community, and you're a teenager. And so
yeah,
I don't know if I have the image correctly, but the way I imagine that is that everybody knows your dad is the like town drunk or like one of the few homeless people,
mhm,
and you're in an environment where there's a lot of resource extraction, lots of fishers and loggers and that sort of stuff. So even if your dad was an alcoholic, most dads probably worked and had a house, right? It's not
yeah,
like a metropolitan kind of place where people can just disappear. It's like, no, everybody knows who everybody is. So there you are at like 14, 15, 16. That must have been embarrassing.
yeah, yeah. It definitely was, and that's probably why I didn't want to have a real relationship with him. I was embarrassed and ashamed. He wasn't living in the community at that time. When it got really bad and it was sort of untenable, he left the community.
Mm.
And I often think that was a real gift that he gave to my
Mhm.
brother and I, because we didn't have to see it, right? Like
Right.
we saw it just for the couple months that he was back before he died, but um, so it becomes easy to sort of push it away. And when you're a teen, you can get distracted by other things, and life is a really dramatic thing anyways. Like, so yeah, I don't even know if like, there were few people that I would talk to about my family, very, very few. Yeah, but I had an easier time putting it aside when I was a teen. But yeah, it was definitely shameful, and or like, it wasn't shameful. I felt ashamed. You know. Yeah, and that is just complex. I think for like being poor as well adds to that, and
And so I'm curious. I mean, that's touching on something for me too. Alcoholic dad growing up, and sometimes I'd be my stoic Carmen would be a little shocked when people would acknowledge that and say, I had an alcoholic mom. I remember a family friend, she always had such a hate on for my stepdad. And, I kind of always rejoiced in that a little bit, was happy about it, but she also super intimidated me. First Nations woman, like loved her, but also totally petrified of her. But I remember her saying to me when I was like 12 or something, I know what it's like and how hard it is to have an alcoholic parent, but I mean, hey, imagine, I remember her saying to me, imagine though that it's your mom, because that was like really taboo, right?
Yeah.
And then when I look back on that now and I go, oh yeah, and her mom would have been like a residential school survivor or intergenerational, right? And so I just think, ooh, gosh, she was really, this was quite a thing even culturally, I think now, when I think of her reaching out to me at that very tender age to just acknowledge like, this is what's going on. And when I think back now, wow, can I ever see how, my 20s and 30s were really shaped by just carrying and enduring, right? I'm curious how, when you look back at teenage Jenn, what parts of her shaped your path, that you can now link to what was going on with your dad?
Well, I actually think what's happening right now in terms of needing to be able to sort of separate feeling from reality right now, like, I'm going through an intensely, personal other thing. But I have to sort of call on that stoicism, and I have to call on that power. And teenage Jenn was really, really involved in everything. Like, she was really active and like on committees and did all kinds of shit that like adult Jenn would have, made fun of. Right. So I was a real doer at that point. And it was like doing as a way to cope. I recognize that now. But it is it's a skill that I'm relying on quite heavily, right, to navigate.
So you're kind of reclaiming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And and she just like, she was also a pretty great friend, like, she was a really, really great friend.
Can you tell us a little bit about your dad? Maybe
Yeah.
there's like a before and after version, but like before his drinking and after. I'm just curious what his personality was like.
Yeah. Well, so my experiences of like what I remember when I was little was that he was always like a lot of fun. And like, I have this one really particular memory, and it might be, well, yeah, I was probably about 4 or 5. So my brother would have been little. And my dad used to take me on these things, and he would call them wild goose chases. And we would just drive around town, which like town was really small, but I didn't know it. And he would get me to navigate. And I always would try and get him lost. Like, that was always my goal. And of course it never happened. So, and then we would go for a float, or like a float at the pop shop after. So like, I have
Oh,
that.
wait a second. This might be a cultural thing. I don't know if everybody in all the countries know that a float is ice cream, but
It's
it's
true.
soda and it totally explodes all fizzy. I don't know if is that universal? Are floats universal? I don't know.
Well, they should be.
They should
Thank,
be.
thank you for explaining it, because yeah, if people didn't know what that is, you've just revolutionized their life.
Totally. Vanilla
Yeah.
ice cream and root beer soda. That's what you're going for,
Delicious.
folks.
Exactly. And yeah, some liquor if you're an adult.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so I have that memory, and then and then the drinking memories were terrible. Like um, I remember my dad telling me he was going to kill himself when I was like 7, and I was the only one there. Like, what do you do?
Mhm.
There's nothing. There's nothing you can do. No, I would have been probably 8,
Mm.
but still a young person. Um, and then, and yeah, I think that what my dad taught me the most, because it's really hard to separate, because he's been dead for half my life. So it's hard to separate like what's real and what's feeling and what's memory and what's emotion. But the greatest impact that he's had is like showing me that not everybody can be saved, but everybody's worth loving,
Mm.
And so it took me a long time to work out that love after he died. I didn't know it. I didn't know it. But in his death, I've learned, I've, yeah, I've, I've sort of learned how unconditional that feels.
How did you become aware of his death or his dying?
Um, like the actual moment.
Yeah.
Um, well, so with alcoholism, it's pretty common that people. I was always told it was called a bleed out, but just there's like almost like varicose veins in the esophagus, and they rupture,
Mm.
and the person starts like vomiting and shitting blood, and they bleed to death essentially.
Wow.
So that had happened a number of times, and of course that's a serious thing, but nobody had ever told me that it was going to kill him. So the hospital called and asked for my mom. And I said, oh no, she's not here. And they said, okay, can you tell them that Randy's had another bleed out and she needs to come down here? And I was like, oh yeah, okay. And she came home and I told her, and she left and she came back like sort of 10 minutes later, and she said, okay, it's time to go. Like we have to go, we have to go say bye. And my brother and I are both like, what? Like, really? Like it was like just like that. So we went down, and he was being transferred from the small hospital to the one in Victoria. So we just got to say goodbye to him as he was wheeled to the helicopter, and then we made the decision as a family to not go down to see him, because that was a decision we made.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so he survived that night. My uncle, his brother, went and stayed with him that night, and then my uncle left, and my dad died.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was about 7:30 in the morning, and my mom and my brother and I all came out of our rooms at the exact same time, and then the phone rang.
Mm.
So, yeah, that was how I found out.
And so, how did you process it in the days and weeks and months and years following? Like, if you were to kind of, in broad strokes, not so that you have to relive it, but
Mm-hmm.
how did that go?
It didn't for a long time. I didn't cry about his death for years. Like, yeah, I found out that he died, and I went and did some banking. Like it didn't impact me because I didn't know what death was. I had no relationship to it, and nobody had ever told me what it was like, and nobody talks about it. And, so it's just like this thing you sort of go through silently. And
Mm-hmm.
it was actually my first ever yoga class, randomly enough. At the very end of class, I was laying there and I just started sobbing. And I was like, oh God, this is grief. Like, where did this come from?
Mm.
And so it was about a year. Like I embrace things wholeheartedly, but it was about a year of actively spending time, and I mean, like, an hour to 3 hours every day with my own grief. And I don't know that that's a sensible decision or a decision that anybody else would ever make, but
Did it feel like a decision? Were you like, I'm gonna spend an hour to 3 hours every day just grieving?
yeah, and that's what that was what my sort of physical yoga practice became, was when I laid out my mat. And so I wasn't doing like physical posture work for the whole time. A lot of it was writing, and what I continue to do today. I just sort of put the mat out, and that's my place where I process. Um, yeah, and just really was actively like recording dreams and seeking. Yes, like at that time I thought yoga was the answer, right? It was a really it gave me something, so this must be the cure, right?
Mm.
Of course, I know different now, but at that point, so I really sort of threw myself into that, and just really got interested in energetics of the body, and how things are held there. And so I became theoretical about the grief, in order to understand, but would also cry for,
Mhm.
sometimes 2 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes. Um, yeah. And in Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, she just has this beautiful line that's like, when you cry like that, it's like watering your own earth.
Mhm.
You create your own river. And so it's, yeah, like it's shitty work, but I do feel like that's what happened,
Mhm.
in a poetic way.
It's reminding me of, like in the Gallic tradition, they have the village keeners, that
Mhm.
come out and they just
The
fucking wail.
banshees.
The banshees, right? And so actually it makes me curious, what is your lineage, your ancestry in terms of heritage? Do you know?
Yeah, Scottish and English from what I understand. Yeah, yeah, but yeah, I think my father's side is English, and then my mother's side is Scottish. There's a castle with my mom's surname
Mm.
still in Scotland, so
Mhm.
I might
Mhm.
be royalty.
Yeah. Aren't we all, sister? Yeah. That's what's so wonderful about the Seven Scales, right? Is that
Yeah,
honor was so important to them that, they didn't believe that there was such thing as sort of lowly peasant. Everyone believed themselves to be honorable and need to comport themselves in such a way that
yeah,
they were all kind of aristocratic, even as
yeah,
they were, I mean, kilts. Need we say more, right?
yeah.
I'm gonna wear a dress to milk this cow. Like it's just like I'm gonna get all fancy.
That's exactly what I'm gonna do.
That's
And
totally
my with my leg knife,
yeah.
whatever that might be called.
I can't remember.
I'm pretty sure it's leg knife.
It's just like that. That's right. So how long has it been since that year on the mat?
Mm, um, 11.
Mm. Hmm. And I've heard you say, I think you said this at one of my retreats one year. You were like, my dad's sure sucked as a dad, but he's great as a ghost.
Yeah.
So,
So I
what's your
feel
relationship like with him, sort of across the realms?
well, okay. So I've only had the experience of like having a vision, with the accompanying energy that I feel. But I he's he's guided me, and so I spent a lot of time sort of traveling around. And right after he died, a year after he died, my grandma died, which was his mom. And because he was already dead, the inheritance was passed down to my brother and I. But it also happened at a time, it was like all in stocks, or I don't know, whatever. It wasn't a whole ton of money. It was just a little bit of money, but it came out, like trickled down slowly, I guess. So every time I wanted to take off somewhere else, I'd get like a grand. It was always enough to just get my ticket to where I needed to get to. And so I always felt like that was him, like saying, yes, you've made the right choice. Yes, you've made the right choice. And it's taken me to some, like wonderful places, terrible places, all the things that life does. But it's just every time that I need to make a big shift, something happens that is very much attached to it. And I've had things like stones appear, and yeah, like that one time that I saw him after the conversation was had, there was this beautiful piece of white beach glass just sitting there, and I found a plane ticket, which was what I needed, from Halifax to Comox for $175.
What? That's a tenth of the normal price.
Yeah.
Maybe less than 10%.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it was a 75% off seat sale. And I'm positive that nobody else found that seat sale, but it just like things like this that, whatever. For the non-believers, I call it the winds of coincidence blew really strong, but like he's always just guided me. And yeah.
And how would you say your relationship with death is now?
It's still developing, I guess. I mean, I'm less afraid of it and like interested in the mystery, and I practicing wholeheartedly at this moment in my life, like embracing what it is to let go. And it's terrifying and it's magnificent. And I don't know. Yeah. It's like the wildest friend you ever had that you love. But it's like, you're never quite sure what's going to happen when it shows up.
It always fucking breaks your heart.
Exactly. It just like, it never, I don't know, it never gets like easy or anything, but it has got more praiseworthy. Yeah.
And you're in a new place in your life right now. You've now gone back across country. This is interesting for some people who've listened to the Questers episode, which is you get back from Quest. And of course, I'm always like, try not to make any huge life decisions in the first little while. You're like, I'm moving across country, leaving my relationship. Not like that all happened suddenly, right? There was build up there. But so that happened, and you're landed somewhere else. And, I was thinking today about how we came to meet, because this is okay. Just let me believe this was how our first meeting went. Okay. You showed up in my office and you brought flowers. And I was like, oh, this gal's got class. And she's like, I'm going to work with you. Let's do some, I can't remember what we were doing. It feels like it was picturing, it might not have been, but it was like the first one you showed up with flowers and we did this like beautiful work. You were dressed up, you were wearing a dress. It was like, this is a person who understands a certain kind of solemnity and sacredness and ceremonial approach that I deeply appreciated. And so we've done lots of work together, and I've been able to witness you over years and through some ups and downs, and you're landing in this new place, and you are that teenage Jenn who is involved in lots of stuff is kind of coming out. And so can you describe like, what is life about for you right now? What are you into? What are you jazzed about? This is like Tiger Beat. Remember? Yeah. Like, it's like, tell us about your faves.
My faves, top 10 faves. Yeah. Must-dos. My life, it's all about expansion and being public right now. And it's like, the past sort of, 7 or 8 years have really been reclusive, pulling inwards, pulling in. And I think it is working on meeting that relationship with death and like seeing it at its face and going like, oh, okay, yeah, you're real. And so as a result of having done that, I feel like, it's expression and public expression, a lot of exploration right now. There's a lot of like really great connections, and I'm incredibly magnetic. Like I'm also aware of how I need to wield that. But my life is both like incredibly mundane and feels full of possibilities. And yeah, essentially like I've severed, like I've lived a death.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it feels. And yeah.
And so now you're in the growth cycle and
Yeah.
you're starting to come out as a professional intuitive. Hashtag channeling change. There's also Instagram. Yeah, there's awesome Instagrams where you're doing your poetry, where you've got, I love the time lapse of you doing yoga in your living room with the poetry and like musings written underneath. So you're pretty on fire these days.
Yeah.
Can you tell me and the listeners a little bit about like, so what are you doing when you're hashtag channeling change?
Okay, so I've been trying to come up with this idea. It's like, what does it mean to change, right? It means to make a conscious choice, but like, and to do that every day. But to channel it seems to require like divine intervention is how it feels, right? And in my life, it's come as crisis. But instead of dwelling, which is a place that I feel like I have been sitting for a long time, doing good work, but it has felt a lot like dwelling. And now it's shifted to something moving forward because I have this like unshakable trust. Like whatever your word is, God, the universe, the angels is with me. Like, I'm good. I got this. And yeah. And I just want to help people who are in that space of dwell. Because it's not, here's what I think people don't tell you. I think people don't tell you it gets harder. I think people don't tell you it gets worse. I think people don't tell you. I think people tell you like, you're strong enough, you've got this, or you're going to be good, or you've done this before, or whatever. And it's really disheartening because it's like, yeah, okay, I know that, but what the fuck am I supposed to be doing?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, yeah, just having it, I don't know that it would have taken me 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
if
know.
You'd had a you ahead of you that was like, okay, Jen, now do this. Put your foot here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or just like you're doing a good job because it's the second guessing, right? It's the second guessing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when you are relying on intuition and the world's telling you intuition is just a coincidence, it's like, what's real?
Mm-hmm. 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 Well, thank you very much for sharing that aspect of grief. And now I'd like to ask you the last question, which is, how do you process rage?
Um, I move a lot. I find that movement helps a lot with rage. I speak even when it makes me feel scared to say what I want to say. And I apologize when I've been like when I've misused it, but yeah, I think that rage at this point in time, I'm directing it at the system and trying to remove it from the individual. But that's hard when you're working with an individual,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that I'm getting it right. I wouldn't say that I'm getting right, but I am not afraid of it. And I am really on board with it. I'm really excited by all the new drama it's bringing.
It's just like high school.
It's just like high school.
But now I can drink in a way that
it's true.
legal. And yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So is yoga still your main form of movement, or are there other things?
I'm doing a lot of walking. I don't even know if what I would call what I do yoga anymore. Like, I would just say it's like certainly just paying attention to what's tight and what's worried in my body.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say that's probably my primary. Yeah, and I do a lot of walking and a lot of, I don't know. Yeah, a lot of moving and dancing. Actually, I dance all the goddamn time.
You're a great dancer.
Thank you.
Everybody can see that on Instagram.
It's true. If you want to see me dance, not in my undies, maybe in my undies.
No, you do yoga in your underwear, but like you usually dance. You do, your backside figures.
It's true.
It features. It's.
I wish
sometimes.
I like to dream that at one day I'll be able to twerk. That is my goal. It is a life goal.
Yeah.
It is a life goal. So.
That's awesome.
One day.
You're a great dancer. What's your Instagram name again?
Coastal Jenn.
Coastal_Jenn?
Correct. Yeah.
That's right. I really love that since we live on different coasts now, I can at least see you there. Yeah. Thank you so much for just sharing the entire journey with us today. We've talked about this stuff before, but I kind of wanted to just give it some focus, and I wanted to hear your story in your words, beginning to end. And so thank you very much for sharing it with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking, really.
I want to let that be sacred, so I'm not going to editorialize too much today, but I do want to once again thank Jenn, bottom of my heart, for sharing so openly about the grief, the confusion, the fog that death can bring, and how she has sat with it and moved and danced and journaled her way forward. Get all the details about the topics we mentioned in this episode, including a bit of background on keeners and banshees, plus links to Jenn's website and Instagram feed in the show notes on my website, carmenspagnola.com. Let's do a shout out today to my listeners in Nova Scotia. I know that there's more than just Jenn there. I know the names of some of you. And I looked at my stats the other day, like hundreds of you. Nova Scotia, Halifax. How is there such a community there that knows my name? It's totally bizarre to me, and magical and special. So, yeah, thanks. Jenn has returned to your city. Please welcome her with open arms. Plus, she has an awesome intuitive business planning workshop coming up in November 2017. This is something that she has assisted me at. I lead intuitive business planning workshops. Mine's November 24th. And now she's taking it out east. And I'm so totally over the moon about that. So please check her out at jennthepoet.com. Finally, just a heads up, the deadline to place your deposit to come on Quest with me is April 15th, 2018. You can get all the details at carmenspagnola.com. CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, take care.